Hey everyone! Tonight we begin with a flight that should have been filled with laughter, but ended up rewriting the meaning of family. You might not survive this one, emotionally at least. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And don't forget to tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. I remember standing under the cold, fluorescent glow of the departure board at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in Atlanta. My heart raced, my palms were damp, and my mind was already on the other side of the world in Bali. The word delayed flashed next to our flight number, but I didn't care. 30 minutes was nothing compared to what I was planning. My husband Marcus's 45th birthday was just days away. He thought Aaliyah and I were back home, but we had decided to surprise him early. He'd been away for nearly 2 months, managing a big construction project. Every night he called, his voice warm and steady. "Soon, my baby. I just want to finish this job so I can take you both somewhere special." He said Bali was that place. And I believed him. 18 years of marriage, it still made my stomach flutter when I thought of him. Marcus Harper wasn't just my husband, he was my compass. Tall, confident, with those gray-green eyes that could melt my irritation faster than butter on cornbread. And that smile, the kind that made you forget you'd been mad at him all day. "Mom," Aaliyah murmured beside me, not looking up from her laptop. "Are you sure Dad will be happy to see us?" Her tone made me pause. My daughter was 15 going on 30, always calculating, always calm. I brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. "Of course he'll be happy, sweetheart. He missed us terribly." Aaliyah nodded, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. She didn't argue, she never did, but I sensed that familiar storm brewing behind her silence. She was brilliant, that child. Too brilliant sometimes. She'd started coding when she was 12. By 13, she was designing school databases for fun. At 14, her teacher told me she had the mind of a scientist trapped in a poet's body. I just laughed back then, proud and clueless. The boarding announcement echoed overhead. I squeezed her hand. "Come on, genius. Bali awaits." She smiled faintly. "Sure, Mom, Bali." The 12-hour flight felt endless. I tried watching a movie, flipping through the airline magazine, even closing my eyes and dreaming of Marcus's face lighting up when he saw us. But Aaliyah, she barely looked away from her laptop. The blue glow of her screen reflected in her dark eyes like a secret she wasn't ready to share. "What are you working on?" "Baby," I asked mid-flight, trying to sound casual. "Just a little surprise for Dad," she said without looking up. "Oh, what kind of surprise?" "You'll see. It's educational." There was something in her tone too deliberate, too mature that made my stomach tighten. But then the plane jolted through turbulence, and I focused on gripping the armrest and saying a silent prayer to every airline safety officer who ever lived. When I woke later, Aaliyah was asleep. Her laptop closed, her hand resting protectively over it like it held something fragile. I looked at her face, soft and peaceful in the cabin's dim light. She looked like a child again, my baby. The air in Bali hit us like a warm wave sweet, humid, scented with flowers and ocean salt. The sky was gold with sunset as we rolled our suitcases through customs and found our driver, a kind man named Wyan. He loaded our bags and chatted cheerfully in English about temples and beaches. Aaliyah listened politely, though her eyes stayed fixed on her phone. Every few seconds, a faint blue light blinked notifications I couldn't quite see. The drive took an hour. Palm trees, street vendors, families on scooters all rushing past like a movie scene I couldn't quite enter. Finally, the villa appeared 2 stories of white stone, red roof tiles, and tropical gardens. It looked like something out of a travel brochure. "This is it," I whispered, my heart thudding. "He rented this just for us." "Yeah," Aaliyah said quietly, "just for us." Inside, everything was perfect teak furniture, silk curtains, the scent of jasmine and ocean breeze, but something felt off. On the coffee table were 2 empty wine glasses. Next to them, a half-finished bottle of Moet and Chandon. "Looks like your dad had company," I said, laughing it off. Probably his business partners. Aaliyah's silence stretched thin. She picked up one of the glasses, sniffed it lightly, then set it down. "Mom," she said softly, "maybe we should call him first." "Nonsense," I said, my heart bubbling with excitement. "We'll surprise him. It's romantic." But as I climbed the stairs, something inside me began to twist. A pair of high heels, red, size 7, lay abandoned on the step. "Not mine." "Strange," I murmured. "Mom," Aaliyah whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, don't go up there." But I did. The bedroom door was slightly open. A whisper of laughter came from inside, familiar, feminine. I pushed the door, and my world collapsed. Marcus was there, shirtless, asleep, and beside him, sitting on the edge of the bed in green silk pajamas, was my sister, Clarissa. For a moment, the world froze. The sound of the ocean outside vanished, replaced by a ringing in my ears. My breath caught, my knees weakened, and everything blurred. Clarissa turned, her face pale as milk. "Simone," she whispered. "Wait, it's not." Marcus woke, blinking, realizing, stammering something I didn't hear. 18 years of marriage dissolved into white noise. Aaliyah's hand touched mine. "Mom," she said calmly, heartbreakingly calm. "Let's go. There's nothing left for us here." I couldn't speak. I just let her lead me away. That night, at a small hotel room an hour away, I sat on the bed staring at the wall. My heart felt like someone had taken a hammer to it and left it splintered on the floor. Aaliyah sat beside me, her laptop open, typing silently. When I finally found my voice, it came out small. "What did you mean earlier? When you said you had a surprise for Dad?" She turned the screen toward me, her expression unreadable. "I've known for months. Mom, Grandpa taught me data analysis. I've been collecting evidence." "I didn't want to tell you until I had proof." On the screen, maps, graphs, and timelines glowed in eerie precision. Proof of what I whispered. "Everything," she said. "Every lie. Every time he was with Aunt Clarissa. It's all here." The air left my lungs again, but this time, it wasn't grief, it was shock. My daughter wasn't just a witness to my heartbreak. She was the architect of what would come next. And somewhere deep down, I felt a new emotion stirring beneath the pain, something that almost resembled power. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, the curtain fluttering in the warm Bali wind, trying to understand how my life had turned from devotion to disaster overnight. 18 years of faithfulness, 18 years of believing in a man who swore family comes first. I could still hear Marcus's voice, calm and practiced, telling TV interviewers, a man's success starts at home. And there I was, a fool with a plane ticket and a gift-wrapped Rolex in my purse. I looked down at the little velvet box on the nightstand, that $20,000 watch I'd spent years saving for, the ultimate symbol of love, loyalty, belief. I felt sick just looking at it. Aaliyah, still in her pajamas, was hunched over her laptop at the small desk across the room. The glow from her screen made her face look older than 15. "You haven't slept," I whispered. She didn't look up. "Neither have you." I hesitated. "You said you've known for months." Aaliyah finally turned her head toward me, and in her eyes I saw something strange, not cruelty, not arrogance, but a calm, fierce certainty. "Yes, Mom, for the last 2 months. She spun her laptop around so I could see. "Grandpa taught me how to map digital behavior. Everyone leaves traces even when they think they're being clever." On the screen was a map of Atlanta with little colored dots scattered across it. "These red dots are Dad's check-ins," she explained. "The blue ones are Aunt Clarissa's. And the green ones," she paused, pressing a key, "are where they met." There were dozens of green dots, cafes, hotels, a gym, a shopping plaza near our house. I stared at it, unable to breathe. You're saying, I'm not saying anything. Mom, the data speaks for itself. Her tone was clinical detached. It was the voice of a scientist presenting findings, not a teenager confronting her father's betrayal. But how I whispered, how could you possibly know all this? Aaliyah leaned back, her fingers resting lightly on the keyboard. Public data, she said simply. Social media posts, timestamps, location tags. People share everything without realizing it. Dad's construction site posts, Aunt Clarissa's gym selfies, restaurant check-ins. The algorithm I wrote cross-referenced it all. Her voice softened slightly. Grandpa Paul taught me that math doesn't lie. People do. I wanted to tell her this wasn't right, that you don't spy on family. But the words wouldn't come, because part of me knew that what she'd done wasn't spying. It was clarity. It was what I had refused to see. Show me, I said. Aaliyah opened another file, a timeline of messages and activity logs. Dad told you he was in Chicago on March 21st. Remember? I nodded slowly. She clicked on the screen that same evening. He and Aunt Clarissa both posted from the same restaurant in Midtown 15 minutes apart. Different angles, same candle centerpiece. I felt something inside me crumble. Then this one, she said, tapping another entry. You remember when he said he had a business dinner at the Grove? I did. I'd stayed up waiting for his call that night. He wasn't there, Aaliyah said quietly. GPS data from his company account puts him at a villa on Lake Lanier. Aunt Clarissa posted a story there, too. A wine glass, the same one you saw downstairs. I felt dizzy. You're sure? Mom, she said softly. There's a 99.9% statistical correlation between their activities. That's not chance. There was silence for a long time. The only sound was the ocean outside, steady and indifferent. Finally, I asked, why didn't you tell me sooner? Aaliyah looked down at her hands. I tried to, but I knew you wouldn't believe it until you saw proof. So I built the proof. She clicked one last file. A 30-page document appeared on the screen, formatted like a scientific paper. At the top was the title, Digital Analysis of Covert Social Connections, a case study in familial deception. My jaw dropped. Is this what you've been working on all those nights? She nodded. It's structured like a professional report introduction, methods, data visualization, statistical conclusions. Grandpa said if you're going to confront corruption, do it with evidence, not emotion. I let out a shaky laugh. Your grandpa always did love his research. Aaliyah gave a small, humorless smile. He says the truth is like code. Mom, you can hide it behind pretty graphics, but the logic always runs underneath. Geez. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at those graphs and charts. Every click of the mouse peeled back another layer of my life, every timestamp, every correlation. Another nail in the coffin of a marriage I thought was sacred. It's strange how betrayal feels physical. My skin tingled, my throat tightened, my heartbeat echoed in my ears like footsteps running away. Finally, I asked, what are you going to do with all this? Aaliyah's eyes met mine calm, steady, frighteningly sure. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Atlanta time, she said, the report goes out. My heart stopped. Goes out where? To everyone, so she said. Dad's business partners, clients, family, friends, anyone connected to him or Aunt Clarissa, they'll all receive the same document. No lies, no rumors, just verified data. I was too stunned to speak. Baby, I said finally, you can't just expose people like that. You'll ruin his career. You'll ruin her life. Aaliyah tilted her head. Didn't they already ruin ours? That line hit harder than any data point ever could. She leaned forward, her voice quiet but firm. I'm not hacking anything. I'm not stealing. I'm just analyzing what they've already shared with the world. Grandpa calls it digital forensics of open data. Totally legal, completely factual. I pressed a hand to my chest. But why? Why send it to everyone? Aaliyah's lips curved into the faintest, saddest smile. Because, Mom, people like Dad thrive on reputation. It's their armor. You can't fight lies with whispers, you fight them with truth in broad daylight. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her she was too young to understand consequences, but looking at her calm, logical, and heartbreakingly grown, I knew she understood consequences better than I ever had. Yeah, by sunrise, I sat on the balcony watching the first light spill over the ocean. My mind was a battlefield, part of me still wanting to believe Marcus would come to his senses, and the other part realizing Aaliyah was right. When a man builds his life on deceit, the collapse is inevitable. "Mom!" Aaliyah's voice broke my thoughts. "It's time." She pressed one final key. The laptop hummed softly. On the screen, a progress bar began to fill emails sent 1 of 492. And just like that, the world began to know what I had refused to see. Somewhere, 9,000 miles away, my husband's perfect world was about to shatter, one email at a time. At first, nothing happened. The world seemed unchanged. The ocean waves still rolled gently. And for one suspended moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, Aaliyah's digital justice would fade quietly into the ether. But within an hour, my phone started buzzing, then vibrating nonstop. Texts, calls, missed calls, notifications piling like a tidal wave. Aaliyah leaned back in her chair, sipping orange juice like she hadn't just detonated a bomb. "Atlanta's waking up," she murmured, eyes fixed on her laptop screen. "Watch." I didn't want to, but I did. The first email came from an unknown sender. "Simone, I don't know what's going on, but your daughter's report is all over our office. It's extraordinary." Then another. "Simone, I saw the data. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve this." My heart pounded. "Aaliyah," I whispered, "what did you do?" She turned the laptop toward me again. The email dashboard scrolled endlessly over 500 addresses. Subject lines flashed: research results analysis of covert connections, confidential report, verified data, independent digital investigation findings. Each message contained the same report, each one sent automatically, like a wave rolling through every corner of Marcus's world. "He's going to call," Aaliyah said calmly. And right on cue, my phone lit up Marcus Harper. I froze. The name looked foreign now, like a brand I'd stopped believing in. "Don't answer," Aaliyah said. "Let him stew." It rang again and again. Then came a flood of texts. "Simone, please, we need to talk." "Aaliyah, what have you done? This is insane. Take it down." I just stared at the screen, my pulse thudding in my temples. "Mom," Aaliyah said gently, "if you answer, he'll gaslight you. He'll twist the story until you start doubting what you saw." Her tone was so steady, so protective, it should have comforted me, but it didn't. Because it wasn't just Marcus's life that was unraveling, it was ours. By the time we checked out of the hotel and headed for the airport, Marcus's name had already hit Atlanta's business circles. His company, Harper and Associates, builders of luxury family homes, had been synonymous with trust and values. Now it was synonymous with infidelity exposed by data analysis. I watched from my phone as the headlines multiplied. CEO's teenage daughter uses AI to expose family scandal digital justice. The viral data report that destroyed a marriage. Every story used Aaliyah's graphs, her timelines, her cold, brilliant math. I was caught between awe and horror. "Baby," I said softly on the plane, "you realize you just destroyed your father's career." Aaliyah looked out the window. "He destroyed it himself." "Mom, I just drew the diagram." Back in Atlanta, the fallout was nuclear. Marcus called every hour at first, then less, then not at all. But the silence wasn't mercy, it was exhaustion. Because his world was crumbling faster than even Aaliyah predicted. Clients were withdrawing contracts, partners stopped taking his calls. His company's slogan, "We build trust," became an online punchline overnight. At first, he tried denial. He told the media the report was fake, but journalists contacted data experts at Georgia Tech, and they confirmed Aaliyah's work was technically flawless. One article even praised her methods. This 15-year-old conducted a digital investigation at graduate level, using publicly available data and clean ethical practices. I didn't know whether to be proud or terrified. Yes. Then came the news that broke him. His biggest client, the Monroes, canceled a $50 million contract with a single sentence. "We cannot build our family home with a man who destroyed his own." That same day, Clarissa was fired from her marketing job. Her boss emailed her with brutal efficiency. "We value integrity and family ethics. Your recent exposure makes it impossible to maintain professional credibility." She texted me later that night. "Sim, please, make Aaliyah stop. I'm ruined." I didn't reply, because I wasn't sure if I wanted her to stop. Meanwhile, the internet was having a field day. Hashtags trended across platforms, had digital justice, here's the data daughter, Aaliyah v. Harper. People online called Aaliyah a hero. Tech blogs praised her as the new face of ethical AI. A cybersecurity professor wrote an op-ed. She exposed deceit not by hacking, but by observation. It's the purest form of truth in the digital age. I didn't know whether to smile or cry. One night, as we sat together on the couch, I whispered, "You changed everything." Aaliyah's fingers paused above her keyboard. Wasn't that the point? "But, honey," I said, "he's still your father." She looked at me with those sharp, dark eyes. A father protects his family. He doesn't build his lies on top of it. The next morning, we got a call from Elaine Wallace, a family lawyer I'd met once through a friend. "I've read your daughter's report," she said. "It's genius. Painful, but genius. And it's admissible evidence." I blinked. Evidence. Yes. "Simone, digital analysis using public data, if verified, is legally valid in court. With this, you could file for divorce tomorrow and take half of everything." I didn't know whether to be relieved or sick. Aaliyah, sitting beside me, overheard every word. "Then let's do it," she said. Elaine chuckled softly. "Your daughter's sharper than most adults I've represented." "She's her grandfather's girl," I murmured. After the call, I looked at Aaliyah. "You're sure this is what you want?" "I don't want revenge," she said simply. "I want justice and peace for you." That night, I finally answered Marcus's call. His voice was raw, desperate. "Simone, please, we can fix this. Don't do this in front of the whole world." "You already did," I said quietly. He hesitated. "She's just a child. She doesn't understand what she's done." "Marcus," I said, my voice breaking. "She understood more than either of us. You taught her to love truth. You just forgot to live it." There was silence on the line. Then, a sigh. "Simone, I never meant to hurt you." "That's the problem," I whispered. "You never meant to, but you did anyway." When I hung up, I realized something strange. I didn't feel rage anymore, not even grief, just release. A week later, Aaliyah's report was being studied in universities. Professors used it in lectures about data ethics. Her school invited her to speak at a seminar titled Truth in the Digital Age. And me, I filed for divorce. Marcus's empire of deceit had collapsed. The house of lies he'd built with charm and charisma now lay in rubble, with a 15-year-old's name written neatly across the blueprint of its destruction. As the judge stamped the first set of papers, I caught myself smiling, not from spite, but from clarity, because for the first time in nearly 2 decades, I knew exactly who I was, and for the first time, Marcus didn't. Divorce court was colder than I ever imagined, not in temperature, but in spirit. Everything about it was designed to drain you: the fluorescent lighting, the beige walls, the way the lawyers spoke as if love and betrayal were just numbers on a spreadsheet. I sat beside Aaliyah in the front row. She wore her school blazer and earbuds, pretending not to hear the legal jargon, but I knew she was listening. She always was. Marcus entered late, his once confident stride now broken into small, uttered steps. His suit fit looser, his tan had faded. The man who used to fill every room with his presence now looked like someone trying not to take up space. When his eyes met mine, I didn't see anger, I saw fear. The judge called the case, flipping through the thick binder of documents. Most of them were Aaliyah's work, her report printed in color, with graphs, dates, and annotated screenshots. Elaine Wallace, my lawyer, stood with quiet authority. "Your Honor," she began, "my client is not seeking vengeance. She's seeking truth. The data provided by her daughter, verified by independent analysts, proves a sustained pattern of deception, financial and emotional. This marriage was built on fraud." Marcus's attorney objected. "Of course." He said the report was inadmissible teenage speculation. But the judge, a woman in her 50s with a voice like tempered steel, held up a hand. "Speculation," she said. "Counsel, this report was reviewed by 2 independent data experts, both of whom confirmed its accuracy. This isn't gossip, it's evidence." Marcus shifted in his seat. His lawyer mumbled something about privacy laws, but the judge shook her head. "There is no expectation of privacy on public platforms. Mr. Harper, your client exposed himself." For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. When the judge finalized the division of assets, she didn't even hesitate. "Mrs. Sands, Harper retains the primary residence, the joint business shares, and all liquid savings pending full audit. Custody of minor child awarded to Mrs. Harper, with supervised visitation for Mr. Harper until further review." Aaliyah squeezed my hand. Marcus lowered his head. It was done. 18 years of silence, deceit, and devotion summed up in 2 sentences and a strike of a gavel. Afterward, reporters waited outside the courthouse. Microphones, cameras, flashing lights. It felt like a circus. "Mrs. Harper, is it true your daughter exposed her father's affair using AI? Do you consider her a hero or a hacker? Will you be suing your sister?" I said nothing, just smiled faintly and walked past them, Aaliyah's hand tight in mine. Sometimes silence is the loudest statement of all. That evening, we sat in our old living room. It felt different now, emptier, but cleaner, like someone had finally opened the windows after years of suffocating air. I poured 2 glasses of lemonade. Aaliyah, curled up on the couch with her laptop, was reading articles about herself. "Look at this one," she said, reading aloud. "Teen data analyst turns family betrayal into ethical lesson. They're calling it the Harper case." I smiled softly. "You always were destined for something big. I just never thought it would start like this." She tilted her head. "You okay, Mom?" I thought about the question. It wasn't simple. "I'm lighter," I said slowly, "but not happy yet. Freedom is noisy at first. You have to learn to live with it." Aaliyah nodded, thoughtful. "Grandpa says freedom's like a clean slate. You can write anything, but the first mark always feels risky." I chuckled. "Your grandpa always loved his metaphors." 2 weeks later, I returned to work at the nonprofit art museum where I'd been a curator before Marcus convinced me to focus on family. My colleagues greeted me warmly, but I could feel the whispers. Everyone had seen the headlines. The director, Mrs. Hensley, pulled me aside. "Simone, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you've inspired a lot of women here. What your daughter did, what you endured, it's more than gossip. It's courage." I smiled, a little embarrassed. "Courage looks different when you're in it. Mostly it just feels like exhaustion." She laughed softly. "Then exhaustion is the bravest thing I've ever seen." That night, I found an envelope on my office desk, no return address, just my name written in a shaky hand. Inside was a letter. "You don't know me, but I saw your story. I left my husband last week. Your daughter reminded me that truth is worth the chaos it brings. Thank you for surviving out loud." I read it twice before tucking it into my purse. A small piece of me healed that night. Meanwhile, Marcus's decline was merciless. The press hounded him. His investors pulled out. His sister Clarissa had fled to California, reportedly working in some obscure marketing firm under a different name. One evening, I saw him on TV. The once polished politician-in-waiting was now unshaven, his voice brittle. "I've made mistakes," he said, "but I'm still a father. I hope one day my daughter forgives me." Aaliyah muted the TV. "Forgiveness isn't math," she said quietly. "You You can't balance that kind of equation. I turned to her. Do you hate him? She shook her head. No, I just don't recognize him. Neither did I. A month later, Elaine called with unexpected news. Simone, she said, there's been a development. Marcus's company is under audit. There are discrepancies in their accounts, money siphoned to personal properties overseas. I froze. You mean he committed financial fraud? It looks that way. If it's confirmed, your daughter's report may trigger a federal investigation. My knees went weak. Oh, God. She didn't mean to start all this. Elaine sighed. Intent doesn't matter anymore. She lit the match. The fire has its own path now. That night, as I tucked Aaliyah into bed, I found her still typing, headphones on, eyes glued to the screen. Hey, I said gently, close it for tonight. You've done enough saving for one lifetime. She smiled faintly. I'm not saving, Mom. I'm building something. Building what? She turned the laptop toward me. A sleek website glowed on the screen, the Data Truth Project. Underneath it read, because secrets can't survive transparency. My throat tightened. You're making this public. Not the personal stuff, she said quickly. Just tools, guides. For anyone who's ever been lied to online, people need to know how to see the patterns before they get hurt. I stared at her, both terrified and in awe. You're your grandfather's legacy. Aaliyah smiled, that calm, hauntingly wise smile. No, Mom, I'm yours. Mimo. I kissed her forehead goodnight, and when I closed her door, I leaned against the hallway wall and let out a shaky laugh through my tears. Because for the first time in years, the house felt alive. Not perfect, not peaceful, but honest. And I realized that honesty, though it hurts, is its own kind of heaven. The weeks that followed were like watching a wildfire move through the past, burning everything that once defined me. Friends I thought were loyal disappeared overnight. Some couldn't face the scandal. Others didn't know what to say. That's the thing about betrayal. People act like it's contagious. But what surprised me most wasn't who left. It was who stayed. There was Mrs. Perkins from church, who brought homemade soup every Thursday. There was my neighbor, Carol, who quietly started mowing my lawn without ever mentioning it. And there was Aaliyah, stronger than anyone her age should have, to be helping me piece together a life that didn't revolve around the illusion of marriage. Still, even with all that kindness, the nights were hard. There's something cruel about silence after a storm. It lets every thought echo. I started journaling again. Not like the lists I'd made years ago, dinner plans, grocery budgets, to-do items, but real journaling, raw thoughts, ugly honesty. He used to hum when he shaved. I can't stand that sound now. Sometimes I still reach for my phone at 5 past a.m., waiting for his text, on my way, love. Aaliyah smiles like him. I hate that it makes me flinch. I remember one night, my pen stopped mid-sentence, and I whispered out loud, who am I without him? And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You're more than you ever needed him to be. No name, just that. For a moment, I thought it was some spam bot or one of those automated therapy lines, but the next message followed. It's Paul. My breath caught. Dad, I typed back, though I knew it wasn't possible. My father had passed 5 years ago. No, sweetheart? Paul Carter, your father-in-law. I stared at the name. Paul Carter, Marcus's estranged father. A man who had cut off contact after Marcus dropped out of law school. How did you get my number? I asked. Aaliyah. She reached out. Brave girl. Said you might need someone who remembers who Marcus used to be before he became this. I hesitated before replying. I don't want sympathy. Good, he wrote. I wasn't offering it. I'm offering information. Information. The word made my heart tighten. What kind? About his company. About where the money really went. You didn't think he only lied about women, did you? I met Paul the next day at a small diner near Decatur, one of those places that still smelled like coffee and hope. He was older now, but the same sharpness remained in his eyes. A military man turned accountant. He had the kind of posture that made truth feel heavier in his presence. "I've been following the news," he said, stirring his black coffee. "Your daughter's a genius." "She's 15, I said softly. He nodded. So was I when I found out Marcus had forged my signature on his first loan. I blinked. I didn't know that. "You weren't supposed to?" He leaned closer. "Marcus has always built things, companies, relationships, but not from scratch. He uses people's foundations." "He did it to me. He did it to you." I swallowed. "What are you saying?" Paul reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin stack of documents. "I worked for Harper & Associates for 2 years after retirement. Marcus begged me to help manage accounts overseas. He said he needed someone he could trust." He pushed the papers toward me. He wasn't just funding a double life. He was hiding millions through shell companies, fake donations, even art purchases. My pulse quickened. Art purchases. Paul smiled grimly. "He used your passion as a cover. Dozens of fake acquisitions made under your name, Simone Harper Fine Arts, LLC. All perfectly legal looking, all tied to laundering his personal assets. I felt like the air had been punched out of me, so even my art was a lie." Paul's gaze softened. "No, the art is real. The deception is his. You gave meaning to the canvas, he gave it paperwork." That night, I sat at my kitchen table, those documents spread out in front of me like broken glass. Every fake invoice, every false signature, it all led to one truth. Marcus hadn't just cheated on me emotionally. He'd used my identity to fund his empire of deceit. I called Elaine immediately. She came over within the hour, still in her office heels, and flipped through the stack with a low whistle. "This is massive," she said. "If we can prove he moved these funds illegally, you're not just a wronged spouse, you're a key witness in a federal case." I rubbed my temples. I didn't want this to become bigger. Elaine gave me a gentle smile. "Justice rarely fits neatly inside our plans." Meanwhile, Aaliyah seemed oddly calm, too calm. She was spending hours coding in her room, headphones in, eyes glowing from the screen's light. One night I peeked in. "Honey, you need sleep. You can't keep running on adrenaline." She didn't look up. "I'm not running on adrenaline, Mom. I'm building the next layer." The next layer. She turned the screen so I could see. There, glowing in green text, was something that made my stomach tighten. Project Phoenix Phase 2 Data Reconstruction. "What's this?" I asked. Aaliyah stretched her fingers. "Grandpa Paul sent me some encrypted records. I'm piecing them together. Think of it as a forensic audit, but prettier." I sighed. "Baby, this isn't your responsibility. It's the adult's job now." She smiled faintly. "Adults made the mess. Mom, kids are just cleaning it up." 2 days later, Elaine called again. "Simone, brace yourself," she said. "Federal agents are opening an investigation into Harper & Associates. It's not just the infidelity anymore, it's financial fraud." I gripped the phone. "Will I have to testify?" "Probably, but don't worry, you'll come out clean. He's the one they're after." That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, the hum of the air conditioner blending with my thoughts. Somewhere in the dark, I realized the strangest thing. For the first time in 18 years, I wasn't scared of what came next, because there was nothing left to lose, only truth to gain. The day the FBI came, I was watering my hydrangeas. That's the funny thing about justice, it never announces itself dramatically. It just arrives in plain suits and dark sedans while you're doing something ordinary, like tending to flowers that never asked for your heartbreak. A white SUV stopped in front of the house. 2 agents stepped out, a tall woman with short hair and a man carrying a black folder. They introduced themselves politely, showing badges. "Monsieur Prince?" "Harper," the woman said. "We're with the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your husband's business transactions." I remember wiping my hands on my apron, trying to sound calm. "Ex-husband," I corrected, "and you're welcome to ask anything you like." They followed me inside. their shoes squeaking on the hardwood floor Marcus had insisted on installing, because maple lasts longer. Aaliyah sat at the kitchen island, pretending to do homework but watching everything like a hawk. The agents spread their files on the table. My name appeared everywhere: bank transfers, digital signatures, fake art invoices. Mrs. Harper, were you aware your husband used your personal LLC to move approximately $2.3 million in undeclared assets overseas? The man asked. I stared at the pages. My name, my handwriting. Even but not mine. No, I said softly. He used my name like he used everything else without permission. The woman nodded sympathetically. You're not under investigation. Quite the opposite. You're a victim of identity fraud, potentially our key witness. Aaliyah looked up from her laptop. Can I help? She asked quietly. The agent smiled kindly. Actually, then you already did. Your digital report started this case. Aaliyah froze. Wait, you read it? The woman chuckled. Miss Harper, your analysis was cleaner than most professional audits we've seen. You did the government's job for us. My heart swelled with pride and worry. She's just a kid, I said, protective instinct rising. The man smiled faintly. A brilliant kid, Mrs. Harper. Betty. After they left, Aaliyah sat at the table, hands trembling slightly. Mom, she whispered, I didn't mean for this to go that far. I reached for her hand. Sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Truth has its own rhythm. Once you release it, it dances wherever it needs to. She smiled weakly. You sound like Grandpa. I'm starting to understand his wisdom a little late. 3 weeks later, the news broke Marcus Harper indicted on 7 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, and tax evasion. His mugshot appeared everywhere: local channels, national news, even memes. The once handsome man who graced glossy business magazines now looked pale, hollow, human. The internet dubbed him the man who built 2 lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't celebrate. Not really. I just sat in my living room with a cup of tea in silence, because justice, when it finally comes, doesn't always feel like victory. It feels like an echo. A week after his arrest, Paul called. They got him, he said simply. I closed my eyes. How's he taking it? Paul exhaled heavily. He's quiet, says he deserves it, claims he was trying to protect everyone from the fallout. I laughed bitterly. He protected himself from reality. Paul paused. He asked me to give you a message. I don't want one. I know, but I think you should hear it anyway. He hesitated, then read from a piece of paper. Tell Simone I built everything on lies, but the only truth I ever had was her. Tell Aaliyah she inherited the best part of me, the one I lost somewhere along the way. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't trust my own emotions anymore. Aaliyah, meanwhile, had become something of a digital folk hero. Journalists requested interviews. Universities reached out with scholarship offers. One morning, I came downstairs to find her sitting cross-legged in the living room, reading an email from MIT. They want me to visit, she said, her voice trembling. They said I could study computer ethics or digital forensics. Full ride. My heart leapt. Honey, that's incredible. She nodded slowly. It feels wrong, though, like this came from pain, not talent. I knelt beside her. Pain doesn't erase talent. It just chisels it into something sharper. She hugged me hard. You always know the right thing to say. I smiled faintly. That's because I've lived through all the wrong things first. Life began to settle into something resembling normalcy. I went back to curating art, this time with new exhibits about truth, perception, and perspective. The irony made visitors smile. One afternoon, while hanging a new piece of fragmented mirror sculpture, I caught my reflection in one of its panels. My face was fractured but whole. That's when it hit me. Broken doesn't mean ruined. It means rearranged. 6 months later, Marcus's trial began. I didn't want to go, but the prosecution needed me to testify. The courtroom was freezing again. Marcus sat across from me, thinner, older. When our eyes met, He smiled weakly, an echo of the man I once knew. The prosecutor asked simple questions. Mrs. Harper, did you authorize your husband to open accounts under your name? No. Were you aware he used your business identity to conceal assets? No. Then came the hardest one. Do you still love him? The room went still. Even Marcus's lawyer turned to look at me. I took a breath. I love the version of him that existed before the lies, but that man died a long time ago. Marcus lowered his head. After court adjourned, I walked out into the sunlight. The air felt new, sharp, and unfiltered. Aaliyah was waiting on the steps, waving from the bottom. Mom, she called, smiling. It's over, isn't it? I nodded. Yes, baby. It's finally over. She hugged me tight. Then let's start something new. I looked at her and realized she wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was the future, the proof that truth, once set free, doesn't destroy, it rebuilds. And that night, I made a decision. I opened my laptop and started typing the first lines of a story, not for court, not for evidence, but for me. Once upon a time, a woman learned that lies don't collapse overnight. They rot slowly until one brave truth burns through them like sunrise through fog. When I hit save, I didn't title it Marcus or the Betrayal. I named it Resurrection, because that's what it felt like to finally breathe again. Spring came quietly that year, soft rains, long mornings, and a kind of calm I hadn't felt since before the storm. I started waking up without that heavy weight in my chest, the one that used to whisper, "What if he lies again?" Now it was gone, replaced by something simpler. Freedom. Aaliyah, though, wasn't slowing down. She spent her days on projects that made my head spin: predictive relationship analytics, ethical AI modules, machine transparency. I couldn't always follow the technical terms, but I understood her heart behind it. One evening, she brought her laptop into the kitchen while I was making tea. "Mom, look," she said, tilting the screen. "It's a prototype." On it was an app called VeryLink. Its interface was minimal white, silver, clean. "What does it do?" I asked, stirring honey into my mug. "It helps couples build trust digitally," she said. "You know how people always say, communication is key? Well, I'm designing a system that helps people understand how they communicate, what patterns show love, what shows distance, when someone's withdrawing before it's too late." I smiled. "You're trying to stop people like your dad before they break everything." She hesitated. "Not just that. I'm trying to help people like you who believed too long." Her words were a gentle knife, honest, but not cruel. Later that night, after she went to bed, I sat at my desk, staring at the same app on my phone. The description read, "Designed for emotional transparency, built for honesty." Somewhere deep inside, I felt something shift. My daughter wasn't just building code, she was building redemption. A few weeks later, Paul called with an idea. "You and Aaliyah should come to Munich," he said in his warm, scratchy voice. "I've got a colleague here at BMW who's fascinated by her work. They're looking for young digital ethicists for a summer program." Germany. The word hung in the air like a promise. It wasn't just a country. It was distance, space, a new beginning that didn't carry Marcus's shadow. "Dad, that's a big move," I said. He chuckled. "You've already moved through worse. Besides, they'll pay for everything. Education, housing, even a stipend. Think of it as a door opening. Simone, all you have to do is walk through." When I told Aaliyah, her eyes lit up. "Munich, are you serious? Grandpa's there?" "Oh my God. Mom, it's perfect. Data science in Europe is years ahead, and I could actually meet Frederick Zimmerman." "Who?" "Grandpa's friend," she said quickly. "He's an engineer at BMW. They worked together decades ago. He's helping coordinate the program." The excitement in her voice made me laugh. I hadn't heard that tone from her since before the betrayal. By June, we were standing in Munich airport jet-lagged, carrying 2 suitcases and a strange sense of peace. The air smelled like rain and efficiency. Everything was neat, orderly, calm. Paul met us at arrivals, waving a small German flag like an overgrown child. "My girls," he shouted, hugging us both tight. "Welcome to a country that still believes in systems that work." Behind him stood a man in his early 50s. Tall, silver-bearded, and kind-eyed, he wore a crisp shirt and carried a small bouquet of tulips. "This," Paul said, "is Frederick Zimmerman. He's the one I told you about." Frederick extended his hand to me. "Simone," he said softly, his English touched by a lilting Bavarian accent. "I've heard so much about your strength. It's an honor to meet you." I felt my face warm. "And you must be the legendary engineer Grandpa's been quoting for years." He smiled. So my reputation still haunts him. Aaliyah stepped forward. "You're the one who built the neural safety framework for autonomous vehicles, right?" Frederick looked impressed. "Yes, actually, you've done your research." She grinned. "I read your paper on machine accountability." Paul laughed. "You two are already speaking a language I don't understand." Frederick's home was a beautiful old house outside Munich, surrounded by apple trees and rose hedges. Inside, it smelled like books and lemon oil. "You'll stay here for as long as you like," Frederick said as he carried our luggage upstairs. "The guest rooms haven't seen family in a long time." Aaliyah's eyes widened when she saw the study. A wall of computers, notebooks, and digital whiteboards lined the space. "This is paradise," she whispered. Frederick chuckled. "If you'd like, you can use it for your research. My work now is mostly consulting, so it's all yours." I watched her eyes glow with inspiration, and my heart swelled. Later that evening, we sat in the garden eating strudel and listening to the hum of bees. The sun was slow to set, painting everything gold. Frederick told stories about his late wife, Greta, and how she'd loved the same shade of sunset after she passed. He said softly, "I didn't think peace was possible again." But peace finds us, sometimes when we finally stop chasing it. There was something in his tone gentle, sincere, that made me look at him longer than I meant to. He caught my gaze and smiled. "You remind me of her," he said quietly, "not in looks, in how you hold your pain without letting it consume you." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Over the next few weeks, our lives fell into a rhythm that felt like healing. Aaliyah spent her mornings at the BMW Research Center, working alongside graduate students. Frederick drove her every day, returning home with stories of how she debated algorithm ethics with engineers twice her age. In the afternoons, I studied German at a local school and volunteered at a small art gallery near the Isar River. The curator, Frau Mueller, adored my background in art history. "You Americans," she said once with a wink, "you suffer beautifully." I laughed harder than I had in months. Evenings were for family dinners, Paul's jokes, Aaliyah's tech talk, and Frederick's dry humor. Slowly, the heaviness began to fade. One night, as thunder rolled across the Alps, Frederick and I found ourselves alone on the terrace, sipping tea. The air smelled of rain and wildflowers. "You've built a new life," he said softly. "Do you ever think about what you left behind?" I thought for a moment. "Sometimes, but it feels like remembering someone else's dream." He smiled. "Good, because the present deserves all your attention." His words lingered in the air, gentle as rain. "Then, later, when I went to bed, Aaliyah was still awake, typing furiously. "What are you working on?" "Sweetheart," I asked from the doorway. She turned, her eyes bright. Phase 3 of Verilink. "It's not about catching liars anymore, Mom. It's about teaching people how to stay honest." I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. "That's beautiful, honey." She grinned. "I learned from the best." And for the first time since my marriage fell apart, I believed her. The first morning in Bavaria felt like breathing inside a painting, the kind of quiet where even your thoughts move slower. Careful not to disturb the air. Frederick's home sat on the edge of a village outside Munich, surrounded by apple trees, roses, and a garden that looked too perfect to be real. A low fog rolled over the hills, and the world smelled of rain, cinnamon, and second chances. I hadn't realized how much I needed silence until then. After years of holding my breath through betrayal, that silence felt like medicine. Aaliyah adapted faster than I did. Within a week, she was enrolled in a summer program at BMW's research center, learning about ethical artificial intelligence. I barely understood half of it, but watching her dive into a future built on truth instead of secrets gave me hope. She'd come home every day glowing with excitement, her laptop full of graphs and code. "Mom, you won't believe it," she said one evening. "They let me test an algorithm that predicts emotional transparency in communication patterns." I blinked. "In English, please." She laughed. "It helps people be honest sooner, before they destroy each other with lies." I smiled at her, that rare, quiet smile that only mothers know, the one that says, "I see what you're really trying to heal." Frederick had a calm presence that filled every corner of the house. He didn't try to fix anything, didn't pry, didn't force optimism. He simply existed with grace, like an anchor that held steady without tugging. He worked as a senior engineer for BMW, but every evening he came home, loosened his tie, and cooked dinner for all of us. "Cooking is like building an engine," he said once. "Chopping herbs with surgical precision, too much force, and you break it. Too little care, and it doesn't start." I couldn't help laughing. "You even make soup sound mechanical." He grinned. "Only because precision is my love language." There was something comforting about the way he spoke, measured, thoughtful, never rushed. Around him, my heartbeat slowed, and the noise in my head softened. One rainy afternoon, I found him in the garage, working on a vintage silver BMW. His sleeves were rolled up, oil smudged on his forearms. "This car," he said, "was my wife's favorite. It breaks down every time it rains." I leaned against the doorframe, "And yet, you still keep it." He smiled faintly. "Yes, because it reminds me that some things aren't meant to be perfect. They just need patience." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of rain filled the air steady, forgiving. Later that week, I received a letter from America. My hands trembled when I saw the name on the envelope, Marcus Harper. "Simone, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you and Aaliyah. You both forced me to look at myself without illusion. I pled guilty. I'm ready to face the consequences. Tell our daughter she made me better, even if she'll never believe it." I read it twice, then tucked it into my journal. When Aaliyah got home that evening, I showed her the letter. She read silently, her expression unreadable. "Do you forgive him?" I asked. She shook her head. "Forgiveness isn't deleting data. Mom, it's just marking it no longer active, so it stops running in the background." I laughed softly. "That's very programmer of you." "Grandpa says healing is like debugging," she added. "You can't fix what you won't examine." Life in Germany began to flow naturally after that. I found work helping a small art gallery curate exhibitions. They loved my background in literature and art history. One day, Frau Müller, the director, said to me, "You Americans have suffered so much, but you still smile. Germans could learn that." I smiled politely. She didn't know that suffering had been my only teacher. Frederick and I often walked home together in the evenings, down cobblestone streets glowing gold under the lamplight. He'd tell me about his projects, about designing safety systems for self-driving cars, and how ethics mattered even in machines. Technology without conscience, he said, is just power in search of a victim. I stopped walking. That's exactly what my marriage was. He looked at me quietly. No pity in his eyes, just understanding. Then maybe it's time power served you for once. Oh. One night, as we sat on the terrace watching the sky fade into lavender, Frederick turned to me. "Simone, you talk about your past as if it's a crime scene. Maybe it's time to call it a museum instead." "A museum." He nodded. "Yes, you visit it sometimes to remember what shaped you. But you don't live there anymore." The simplicity of it broke something open inside me. I whispered, "I think I'm finally ready to leave the museum." He smiled that patient, quiet smile of his and reached for my hand. Outside, the rain had stopped. The moon rose over the apple trees, silver light spilling across the garden. And just like that, I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living in full color, at last. By the time autumn settled over Bavaria, life had found its rhythm again, slower, steadier, almost musical. The mornings were crisp. The air smelled of wood smoke and fresh bread. For the first time in years, I woke up without bracing myself for disappointment. It's strange how peace doesn't come with fireworks. It arrives softly, like the first snowflake landing quietly on the wreckage of what once was, and slowly turning it into something beautiful. Frederick became my quiet constant. Every morning, he'd bring me coffee just the way I liked it, 2 sugars, no milk, and place it on the kitchen table beside the newspaper. "You always forget to rest," he'd say with that half smile, "so I'm reminding you gently before your body does it rudely." He had a way of grounding me without ever making me feel small, and that kind of care. I didn't realize how rare it was until I felt it. Aaliyah, on the other hand, was on fire in the best way. Her research had caught the attention of the German press, and suddenly, my 16-year-old was being called the digital conscience of her generation. She handled it with quiet grace, though no arrogance, just focus. One evening, over dinner, she told us, "BMW's offering me an internship, real projects, real scientists." Frederick beamed with pride. They'd be fools not to. I tried to smile, though a tiny ache bloomed in my chest. It's a strange thing for a mother watching her child outgrow her pain faster than she can. After dinner, I walked with Frederick through the garden, the stars glowing faintly above us. "She's not a child anymore," I said softly. He nodded. "She's an arrow. You were the bow." "Then why does letting go hurt?" "Because you loved what you launched," he said simply. I started teaching part-time at the local art institute lectures on symbolism and human emotion in modern art. My students were kind, curious, and too young to have seen heartbreak up close. One of them asked, "Frau Harper, how do artists know when a painting is finished?" I thought for a moment, then smiled. When it stops hurting to look at it, they wrote it down as if it were poetry. Maybe it was. The seasons turned. Aaliyah began working with a small team of data ethicists, developing a prototype called Harmony AI, a system designed to detect emotional imbalance in human communication before it escalated into conflict. When she explained it to me one night, I laughed softly. "So basically, a robot therapist." "Kind of," she said, "but better. Robots don't lie." I shook my head. "You're really your grandfather's legacy. You know that." "Maybe," she said, smiling, "but I'm also yours." Then, one quiet evening, Frederick came home holding a small box. "I brought something for you," he said, his tone serious but soft. Inside was a silver locket, simple, elegant, shaped like a teardrop. "Open it," he said. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of me and Aaliyah on the beach years ago, the other of him and his late wife, Greta. "I thought," he said gently, "it was time our stories met, not to replace what we've lost, but to honor it together." I felt my throat tighten. "Frederick, this is—" He stopped me with a small gesture. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you won't keep living like a ghost in your own life." Something broke quietly inside me, then not from pain, but from release. I nodded. "I promise." Ding! That winter, snow blanketed everything in white. The world looked reset, as if the universe itself had pressed refresh. On Christmas Eve, we sat around the fireplace, me, Frederick, Aaliyah, and Paul, laughing over roasted chestnuts. For the first time, our laughter didn't sound borrowed. It sounded like it belonged to us. "Mom," Aaliyah said suddenly, "I want to build something for Grandpa." "What do you mean?" I asked. "A legacy program," she said excitedly. "It'll catalog all his stories, writings, and projects, but organized like a living archive." He always said wisdom shouldn't die with its owner. Paul chuckled. "Well, I can't argue with immortality if it's in code." Frederick leaned back, smiling at me. Your daughter's not just brilliant, she's building futures. I looked around that room, the firelight flickering over the faces of the people I loved, and realized something profound. This wasn't the ending of a painful story. It was the prologue of a better one. Later that night, as the snow fell softly outside, Frederick walked me to the window. "You know," he said quietly, "you laugh differently now." "Oh, and how's that?" Like someone who's finally breathing instead of surviving. I turned toward him. The firelight danced across his face, kind, patient, open. Without overthinking, I reached for his hand. "Frederick," I whispered, "thank you for showing me that peace isn't silence, it's safety." He smiled, and love isn't fire, it's warmth that doesn't fade. Outside, the church bells rang midnight, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted by what I'd lost. I felt blessed by what I'd found. Winter melted into spring, and with it, my life began to unfold in quiet, deliberate ways, not dramatic, not cinematic, just beautifully ordinary. I found myself humming while making breakfast, smiling at strangers in the market, leaving fresh flowers by the window for no reason at all. It's strange, isn't it? After years of fighting storms, you almost forget what calm sounds like. Frederick and I had settled into a rhythm that felt natural. He never tried to impress me, never filled the air with promises, just presence. Real, steady presence. The kind that lingers after everyone else has gone. One morning, as we were having breakfast, he placed a small envelope beside my cup. "What's this?" I asked. "Just an invitation," he said casually, though I could see the flicker of nerves behind his calm smile. Inside was a dinner reservation, 1 table, 2 names, and the date marked with a tiny heart. That evening, he took me to a quiet restaurant overlooking Lake Starnberg. The air smelled of lilacs and rain. A pianist played softly in the corner, and for a moment, I forgot every sorrow that had ever touched me. Frederick reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. "Simone," he said, "you don't owe anyone your forgiveness, but I hope you'll give yourself permission to be happy." I said softly, "I already am." He smiled that quiet, knowing smile and slid a small velvet box across the table. My breath caught. "I'm not asking for forever," he said gently, "just the chance to walk beside you, however long this chapter lasts." I opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the candlelight like a promise. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Then, finally, I whispered, "Yes." He exhaled, almost laughing in relief. "You know, you've just made an engineer the happiest man alive." I laughed too, the kind of laugh that only comes when you realize the universe has given you back something you thought was lost forever. The wedding was small, intimate, just close friends, Paul and Aaliyah. We held it in the garden, beneath the apple trees that had witnessed every season of our healings. Aaliyah gave a speech that made everyone cry. "Mom," she said, holding a glass of sparkling cider, "you taught me that systems, whether digital or emotional, can crash. But you also taught me that they can be rebuilt, stronger, cleaner, more honest. You and Frederick are proof of that." Everyone applauded, but I just stood there, stunned by how wise she'd become. My daughter, the same girl who once cried in silence, now teaching the world about emotional integrity through technology. We spent our honeymoon in Italy, Venice, Florence, Rome. The streets glowed gold under the setting sun, and every moment felt borrowed from a dream. Frederick took photos constantly, insisting on documenting our proof of happiness. In Venice, while crossing the Rialto Bridge, he turned to me and said, "Do you know what I love most about this city?" "What's that?" "It keeps sinking, yet refuses to disappear." I smiled. "So, Venice is us." "Exactly," he said with a grin. "Except you're far more beautiful and less humid." I laughed so hard that people turned to look, but for once, I didn't care who was watching. When we returned home, Aaliyah had news of her own. "Mom, Guess what? Stanford offered me an internship in their ethics and AI lab. My jaw dropped. Stanford in California. She nodded, trying to play it cool, but her eyes sparkled. They said they want to study how technology can repair trust in relationships. I think they read my paper on data transparency. Frederick smiled proudly. You're following your calling. Aaliyah, that's the purest form of success. She hugged him. You know, Frederick, you're the only man I've ever trusted to love my mom right. He smiled softly. Then I'll take that as my greatest achievement. Inami. Before she left for the U.S., Aaliyah gave me a new version of her app, VeryLink 2.0. This one's not for couples or businesses, she said. It's for families. It helps people understand each other before it's too late. How does it work? I asked. She smiled mischievously. You'll see. I installed it on your phone already. It's in testing phase. I laughed. Should I be worried? No, she said. You should be proud. You inspired it. That night, I opened the app. It greeted me with a message. Trust is not rebuilt by proof. It's rebuilt by presence. The screen glowed softly, fading into a photo of me, Aaliyah, and Frederick, all laughing in the garden. I sat there staring at it, realizing that somehow, through all the heartbreak and loss, my daughter had turned our pain into something that could help the world. Do you see us? Sometimes, I'd walk outside late at night, the air cool and still, and look up at the stars. I'd think of everything that had happened, the betrayal, the scandal, the trial, the new life. And every time I came back to the same truth, pain changes shape, but it never vanishes. What matters is what you build from its remains. For me, it was peace. For Aaliyah, it was purpose. And for Frederick, it was love reborn. That night, as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I heard Frederick's voice from the garden. Simone. Yes. He looked up at the stars and smiled. You know what I think the universe does best? What? It forgives in silence. I walked to him, wrapping my arm around his. Then let's be part of that silence. We stood there, side by side, listening to the wind move through the trees. No noise, no ghosts, no fear. Just peace. The day Aaliyah left for California, the sky was a gentle shade of blue, the kind of color that feels both hopeful and heartbreaking at once. We stood at the airport, just the three of us. She wore a light denim jacket, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, and a nervous smile that reminded me of her first day of school. Don't cry, Mom, she said, though her voice wavered. You'll make me start. I laughed softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. I'm not crying, I'm just leaking pride. Frederick chuckled behind us. That's what happens when mothers upgrade from raising daughters to raising geniuses. Aaliyah rolled her eyes playfully. I'm still the kid who burns toast, remember? I hugged her tight. Yes, but now you'll burn it with purpose. When the final boarding call echoed through the terminal, she pulled back, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Mom, thank you for surviving long enough to show me what healing looks like. I couldn't speak. I just nodded and squeezed her hands one last time before she disappeared into the crowd. Frederick slipped his arm around me as we watched her go. She's ready, he said softly. I know, I whispered. But am I? He smiled. That's the thing about letting go. You never feel ready, you just do it anyway. The house felt bigger after she left. Quieter, yes, but not lonely. Her laughter lingered in the hallways like sunlight that refused to fade. Frederick and I fell into a new rhythm: weekend markets, morning walks by the lake, and evenings filled with old vinyl records and simple meals. Sometimes I'd find him reading quietly by the fire, glasses sliding down his nose. I'd tease. You look like a philosopher about to write something world-changing. Without looking up, he'd reply, only if it's about you. We laughed often, but even in laughter, there was gentleness and understanding that life was fragile and worth handling carefully. A month later, I got a call from Aaliyah. Mom, you're not going to believe this, she said breathlessly. Stanford just partnered with UNESCO. They're funding VeryLink as an international ethics project. I gasped. Sweetheart, that's incredible. It's bigger than me now, she said. They want to use it in schools, therapy programs, even peace negotiations. Imagine that, Mom. Something we built from pain might actually prevent others from feeling it. I pressed a hand over my heart. Your grandfather would be proud. I know, she whispered. So would Dad. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. That simple acknowledgement, not bitter, not nostalgic, just peaceful, told me how far she'd come. Before hanging up, she said, Mom, I added one more feature to VeryLink. Oh, what's that? It detects emotional closure, the kind that doesn't need an apology. I named it after you. My throat tightened. You didn't. I did, she said proudly. It's called the Simone Protocol. That night, I sat by the window watching the moonlight spill across the garden. The air was still, the world quiet. Frederick joined me with 2 cups of tea. You've been smiling for the last 10 minutes, he said softly. That's either dangerous or adorable. I handed him the letter I'd just received from the U.S., the official statement confirming that Marcus had been sentenced. 10 years, eligible for parole in 6. Frederick read it silently, then folded it neatly and placed it back on the table. Does it bring you peace? He asked. I thought for a long moment. No, I said finally. Peace came before justice. Justice just confirmed it. He nodded. Then maybe you've already done the hardest part. I didn't do it alone. He smiled. No one ever really does. In spring, the garden bloomed wild and generous. Roses climbed over the fence. Tulips opened in impossible colors. Frederick and I spent our mornings tending to it, though. Truth be told, he did most of the tending. One morning, while pruning the apple trees, he said, Do you know why I love gardening? Because you like control, I teased. He laughed. Because it reminds me that growth and scars can exist on the same branch and both are necessary. I looked down at my hands, the faint scars, the lines of age, and realized how true that was. That summer, we traveled to Provence. The lavender fields stretched endlessly, and the scent of earth and bloom followed us everywhere. At dusk, Frederick took my hand as we watched the sky fade into violet. If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd fall in love again at 59, he said, I would have laughed. I smiled. And if someone had told me that love could be calm instead of consuming, I would have cried. He squeezed my hand gently. Then maybe that's what we both needed, calm after the fire. The cicadas sang, the air shimmered with warmth, and for the first time in my life, I felt no need to plan the next moment. I was already living it. That night, as we walked back to our cottage, I thought of Aaliyah across the ocean, coding, building, changing the world, and of the younger version of myself who once thought her story had ended in that hospital room. If only she could see this now. Not revenge, not escape, but peace earned, steady, complete. And as Frederick opened the door, letting the light spill across the threshold, I realized something simple yet profound. Sometimes survival isn't the miracle. Continuing to love after it, that's the real one. It's been 3 years now. 3 quiet, luminous years since the storm that nearly broke me. The kind of years that don't scream for attention, they whisper, softly, in gratitude. Aaliyah's in California still, though she visits twice a year. Every time she walks through our front door, it feels like spring itself has arrived even in November. She talks faster than I can follow. Juggling tech conferences, ethics panels, and interviews. But underneath all that brilliance, she's still my girl, the one who curls up on the sofa, steals my blanket, and says, Mom, tell me that story again, the one about how you found yourself. Frederick and I have built a life that feels like the second act I didn't know I'd get. Some mornings, I'll catch him humming while he cooks breakfast, wearing that ridiculous apron that says kiss the chef in German. Other mornings, we walk to the lake in silence, our fingers brushing as the mist curls around the trees. It's not a fairy tale. It's better. It's real. Sometimes the memories of the past return uninvited, unpredictable. A scent, a song, a stray line of handwriting. But they no longer sting. They're like shadows that pass across the sun there for a moment, gone the next, unable to darken the whole sky. One afternoon, I received a letter postmarked from a correctional facility in South Carolina. I knew who it was before opening it. Elijah's handwriting was still neat, still practiced. Simone, I don't expect forgiveness, and I know I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that I've seen the world from the inside out, now stripped of everything that once defined me, for the first time. I understand the weight of what I did. I destroyed something sacred. And yet, I still carry your kindness like an undeserved mercy. You once told me that peace wasn't silence, it was safety. I never knew what that meant until now. I hope you found it, Elijah. I folded the letter carefully, without anger, without nostalgia, just quiet acceptance. He had found his silence. I had found my peace. There was no overlap left, and that was okay. In June, Aaliyah's project, the Simone Protocol, launched globally. It became a cornerstone in emotional AI, helping families, couples, and even companies navigate communication with empathy and transparency. News outlets kept using my name, calling me the woman who inspired the empathy algorithm. I laughed every time I heard it. Me once, just a housewife with trembling hands and a shattered marriage, now somehow part of something that healed others. During the live broadcast of the launch, Aaliyah said, "This project began with a story of betrayal, but it's not about pain. It's about what comes after. My mother taught me that truth can hurt, but it can also set you free if you're brave enough to face it." I cried, not out of sadness, but pride, the kind of tears that taste like redemption. Later that summer, Frederick and I flew to Paris not as tourists this time, but as artists. My solo exhibition opened at a small gallery near Montmartre. The theme was resilience in color. The final painting was titled The Red House. People gathered in front of it for long moments, whispering. It wasn't literal, not the old home, not even a house at all, but a blend of scarlet, ash gray, and gold. A critic asked, "What does it represent?" I smiled. "It's where I buried my grief and built my peace." That night, after the gallery closed, Frederick took my hand and said, "You've turned pain into light." "Maybe," I said, "but I think it was love that held the brush." We spent our last evening in Paris sitting by the Seine, the lights reflecting off the water. Frederick pulled out a small notebook, his old engineering journal. "Writing again," I teased. He grinned. Not equations this time, just gratitude. He opened it to a page filled with short sentences, little fragments of wonder. Simone's laugh, 712A. Her hands smell like oil paint and rosemary. Peace looks like her reading by candlelight. I looked at him, speechless. "Life's too short not to document miracles," he said simply. And in that moment, I realized something I wish I'd known long ago. Love doesn't have to rescue you. Sometimes it just reminds you that you've already survived. The next morning, I walked alone through Montmartre before sunrise. Paris was still half asleep, the smell of bread, coffee, and wet cobblestone filling the air. I reached the steps of Sacré-Cœur and sat quietly, watching the first lights spill across the city. For a moment, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Mom, I made it." The breeze felt like an answer. Now, as I sit here recording this story, this final chapter, I can tell you one thing for sure. Freedom doesn't come the day you leave someone. It comes the day you stop waiting for them to come back. I stopped waiting. And in that space of silence, life rushed in color, sound, love, purpose. So if you're listening to this tonight, in your car or your bed, or somewhere between heartbreak and hope, I want you to remember this. You're allowed to start over. You're allowed to rebuild. And most of all, you're allowed to be happy again. Because peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision that pain will no longer define you. My story began with betrayal, but it ends with rebirth. For years, I believed love meant endurance, that if I just tried harder, forgave faster, and stayed quieter, I could keep the life I'd built. But what I learned is that love without truth isn't love at all. It's a performance, and I was tired of performing. Elijah's lies tore my world apart, but in the wreckage, I found my true self. I found courage disguised as grief, strength hidden beneath trembling hands, and freedom waiting behind the word enough. My daughter turned our pain into purpose. My art became my voice. And love, real love, found me when I wasn't looking for it, when I finally stopped trying to prove I was worthy of it. Today, my life is not perfect, but it's mine. Every color, every scar, every second earned. If you want to watch the full story unfold, click the YouTube player in the description below.